Hi, everyone. Let's see. Any more students? How's everybody doing for Tuesday?
Good.
Getting ready for Thanksgiving? Okay. If everybody could come on camera, I would appreciate that. Okay. I'm missing two students. Okay. Samir and Sharina. I don't see either of those students.
We were in our first class this morning and Sharina lost power, so she might be
Oh,
trying to still get back on.
oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. Fantastic. Okay. I don't mean fantastic. She lost power. I mean fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. So welcome. Okay. Thanks, Janaea. Okay. So welcome to week 9. This is our last week of content. Okay, we have a um, couple of concepts to cover today. Um, and then we're going to do a case study. First and foremost, I want to go through the announcement I sent over the weekend about the roadmap. So we have a lot of things coming up in the next 3 weeks. So I want to go through that. And then I would like to cover the last couple of concepts. And then we'll do a case study. How does that sound? Does anybody have any questions before we get started?
I did see on your announcements that it was like saying like due date, it was saying in March that the stuff
I
was due.
changed those. I changed those. I made an adjustment yesterday. My Monday class pointed that out. I thought I had all the dates correct, but in that week 9, I had some of the March dates in there. So sorry about that, but I have corrected it and we'll go through that now. Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, no, I don't know.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
thank you.
it's there.
All right. Thanks. All right. So, let's see. We're close to the finish line with a couple of weeks left. We've got 4 weeks left. I'm proud of all you guys. It's been wonderful having you in class. Um, we need to finish strong. We've got a lot going on in the next couple of weeks. So this week we have, let me make sure the dates changed. Yep, the dates changed. Okay, so this week we have several things due. All right, we have your third set of NCLEX questions due this Sunday. And as I sent out an announcement last week, I've already opened up the week 11 NCLEX. If you would like to start working on that, okay. So that's open to you. You have your second and final HESI case study, domestic violence and cultural competency case study. That's due on Sunday. Um, and then you have your HESI prep assignment. That's due on Sunday. Okay. The other thing we have going on this week is exam 3 reviews. Okay, I sent an updated schedule, and that's another announcement. We'll go through that. But there are 3 reviews, one today, or this evening, one tomorrow morning, and one Sunday. Okay. I attached the week 9 blueprint recording and the PowerPoint for today. And then next week, we go right into exam 3. So next week at this time, you'll be taking exam 3, and I'll send out the information and guidelines for that over the weekend. We'll post grades next Saturday or the Saturday after the exam, as we have Friday night classes. Okay. Also next week are your vulnerable populations assignment is due. Okay. Make sure you're having a look at the rubric while you're putting this together, since um, that's how it's graded. Okay. Also during exam week, we have HESI reviews, and that's in the schedule that I sent you. So I know we have an exam, but you guys jump right into HESI the following week. So next week are HESI reviews as well. Preparing for your HESI, review your HESI prep assignment. That's going to be your biggest resource for studying for the HESI, is the HESI prep assignment that you're working on, and that's due this week. But also have a look at your previous study guides, your weekly notes that you've been taking. You've got your concept reviews. You've got your readings. And we'll talk about that more in HESI reviews. Okay, and then week 11 is your HESI week. I know I provided you a schedule at the bottom of this announcement. No, it was in another announcement. No, it was last week. I sent you the updated schedule of what campuses I had so far. I got a message from Dean Brown that all the campuses have been scheduled for days and times. So I'll update that spreadsheet if your campus was not on there as having the scheduled date yet, and I'll resend that out. Have you heard from your campuses about scheduling your HESIs? Yes? Amy, I
I
can only
haven't
see.
I haven't heard anything from mine. I haven't even got an email. You know how like they send you the email to sign up? They haven't
Yeah.
done that. So do I need to go straight into Evolve and sign up?
Um, Well, your campuses should be reaching out to you of that you're ready to sign up. Here's the days
I
and times. So
no.
they may have just scheduled it. What was Caitlin, your Centerville, what, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gave me the times. I got the times off your announcement, but they haven't said
Oh,
anything.
well, then you could go into Evolve if they're already set up and see if you can schedule yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The one thing to remember when scheduling your HESI, however your campus is having you schedule your HESI, make sure you're signing up in the correct cohort group. Sometimes that can create an issue if you're not in the right cohort group. Okay. And then week 11. So week 11 is your NCLEX, your HESI, and that's when the week 11 NCLEX is due. So if you want to get it done ahead of time, do it ahead of time, because no late work, there's no late work accepted after week 11. So if you don't do your NCLEX by the Sunday of week 11, there's no 7-day grace period. No, for week 11, nothing can be accepted late. So I would work on that if you can find the time to work on that. Okay. Um, HESI remediation guidelines. I sent that to you in this announcement. Okay, this hasn't changed from the last couple of terms. These are the um, required HESI hours based on your remediation hours based on your HESI score, right? Um, let's see. Okay, so make sure you have a look at that, because I always get questions. How many hours do I need to do? Um, here's your answer. It talks about what remediation is, and it gives you your hours. Okay, I know everybody's seen this before in previous terms and classes. Okay, so you have all that information available to you. Your week, we have no class during week 11. You're taking your HESIs. So your taking of the HESI is your week 11 attendance. Okay. However, now I'll remind you of this. Week 12, we still have class. You have to get attendance in week 12. Okay. So we'll have a very short class on Tuesday of week 12. It's usually 15, 20 minutes. We just do a term evaluation. We talk about the HESI, do any end of term advising that we need to do. Okay. So do mark on your calendar, you do need to come to class to get attendance. And the reason why that's so important is going into the next term. If for something happens in week 1 and your schedule's being changed and you're not in class, week 12 is going to carry over to week 1 with regards to attendance. And you don't want to be in that 14-day drop period. Does that make sense? All right. So week 12, you do need to attend. The other thing for week 12 is remediation is due no later than the Monday of week 12. Okay. So Monday, December 16th. And there's no wiggle room on that. If you don't get your remediation done by that Monday of week 12, you're going to end up with a 0. And if you don't complete the remediation, you end up with a 0. Okay. I wouldn't wait till Monday, December 16th to be doing your remediation. I always tell students to try and get the remediation done as soon after you take the HESI. Okay. And once your remediation is done, that week, the week of the HESIs, I'm in Evolve all week checking on, make sure you've completed the HESI. I'm checking on remediation. As soon as the remediation is completed, I will put your HESI grade in the grade book. Okay. And that I don't turn homework grades on until that Monday night, because I do have people that actually do wait till late Monday night to complete their remediation. And I can't turn on homework grades for a single student. I have to, when I turn them on, it goes for the whole class. Okay. So I have to wait till all the remediation is completed. So get it done as soon as you can. You can let me know when you've completed it if you want. Otherwise, I'm in there checking every day as well. Um, and then we'll finish up class Tuesday, and I believe grade books are closed on Wednesday. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about any of that roadmap? I like to do a roadmap in week 9 for the final 4 weeks and just lay everything out. Try and organize the weeks for you. Does anybody have any questions on the roadmap? This was another announcement I sent to you. Okay. And I took out exam 1 and exam 2 so it wouldn't be so wordy. So really what you have here is this week's reviews and next week's reviews with regards to exam 3 and HESI. All right. So Dr. Ford's doing hers tonight at 8. I'm doing mine tomorrow at 11. And Dr. Kopteros is doing hers Sunday night at 8 p.m. All right. And then next week is in blue are your HESI reviews. So they'll be Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. All right. So you have that. I think that is it. Questions on all of that? I did get a couple of questions about the HESI prep yesterday in my Monday class. If you have printed off the document and are handwriting it, that's no problem at all. Just take screenshots of what you're doing and you're going to have to submit those. Okay. If it's a Word document and you've filled it out online, then just submit it as an attachment. Okay. So either way, handwritten, written, or typed or in a document. Remember, this HESI study guide is you're going to get out of it what you put into it. This is your true study guide. All those, as I said in week 1, all those topics on the left-hand side are questions, are topics that are asked on the HESI. Okay, I know it's long, I know it's tedious, but they're all covered on the HESI. All right. Questions? No questions? Okay. All right. Let's I want to cover our last two weekly concepts, last two concepts, human abuse and violence. I want to bring up a PowerPoint. Let's bring up our week 9 PowerPoint. Everybody see this? Okay. Okay, that second slide was your readings. I am going to, when we cover the second concept, cultural influences in nursing, we're going to go to chapter 14. I want to point out some things in chapter 14 that are important knowledge for you to understand the concept. Okay, so there's our concept. So when you think about human abuse and violence, what do you think about? What things?
Neglect.
When you think about human abuse and violence, what kinds of things do you think about?
Physical abuse.
Pardon me?
Physical abuse.
Physical abuse. Yep.
Mental abuse.
Mental abuse.
Any type of negligence, even if it's, like we were talking about, intentional or unintentional.
Yep.
Maybe
What-
domestic.
Domestic abuse. Intimate partner abuse.
Could we
Financial.
go ahead? Sorry.
Oh, just a financial abuse.
Financial abuse. No, intimate partner abuse, intimate partner homicide, or human trafficking,
That's a good one.
child abuse, child neglect, elder abuse, elder neglect, murder, assault, battery, suicide.
Would suicide really be like abuse?
Suicide is considered violence against yourself.
That's crazy.
Okay, a couple things. We know that violence is a maladaptive coping mechanism. All right. We know that high levels of violence are tied to health disparities. Could somebody mute with the background noise, please? Okay, there we go. We know that high levels of violence are tied to health disparities and adverse health outcomes. What does that mean? Health disparities, people at risk. What populations are at risk? Higher risk for violence.
So low income.
Low income. Who else is at risk?
Immigrant.
Elderly.
Immigrants. It's all those vulnerable populations we've been talking about all term, right? We know that violence is common in vulnerable populations, just like substance abuse is. All right. Violence is a means of exhibiting and or regaining control. It's predictable, thus preventable, if we look at both victims and perpetrators. And when you're working with clients that have suffered abuse, you may be working with perpetrators, you may be working with victims of abuse, and you may be working with people who have witnessed abuse. Right? People who become involved in violence typically have previous exposure or some form of exposure to violence during their lifetime. We know that abusers were often beaten when they were children. Maybe they witnessed their siblings or being beaten or neglected. Maybe their parents, there was domestic violence going on with their parents or their guardians. Right? They learn that violence is a way to manage conflict. Right? going back to disparities. High levels of violence are tied to health disparities and adverse health outcomes. Remember, chronic stress can cause physical issues, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, cancer, right? Living in poverty when you have less access to resources, right? Less access to getting the care that you need. When we say nurses are mandatory reporters, what does that mean? What does that mean?
If you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm. Is that just in the workplace?
No.
What other environments?
They're mandated to report any suspicion of abuse.
In any setting,
Any
right?
environment, yeah.
Any setting. So this is outside the workplace as well. Could be the home, could be family gathering, could be at the grocery store, park. Pardon me?
I said at the club.
Yeah. Yeah. So nurses were mandatory reporters of violence against children, elders, vulnerable adults. Okay. There's a difference between physical neglect and emotional neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So physical neglect, failure to provide adequate daily needs, food, clothing, shelter, hygiene, necessary medical care. That's what we consider physical abuse. Okay. Or physical neglect. Emotional neglect is the lack of or the omission of basic nurturing, right? Basic nurturing, role modeling, um, acceptance, whatever is needed to care for the person, whether it's an elderly parent, an elderly relative, a child. Okay, it's the omission of nurturing, taking care of the people that are relying on you to take care of them. We know that kids who are exposed to violence may be victims and or witnesses. They become very high risk for mental disorders. They become high risk for substance abuse. They become high risk for self-harming, right? And they're at risk for suicide. We need to make sure follow-up or counseling, especially for children. I saw this over and over again in the schools. Kids who are either victims or victims of abuse or neglect, witnessed abuse and neglect. It's critical for these kids to get follow-up. Okay. We know that abuse is about power and control, right? Family violence typically happens with the most powerful to the least powerful. Okay. Family violence is perpetuated in a cycle as children grow up seeing violence used as a method to control them. Control their parents. We know that abused kids are much more likely to perpetuate violence or tolerate violence in their own relationship as adults.
Or become serial killers.
Or become serial. Yeah. Right? What about families living in poverty? Or families living with economic strain. Maybe there's an unplanned pregnancy in the family. Somebody's lost their job. Marital strain, divorce, infidelity, somebody's died. Right? Families living in these situations are at a higher risk to experience violence. The other thing that contributes to violence is social isolation, right? The lack of resources, the lack of social support, the lack of interaction with others, right? This leads to a family's real struggle to cope with crises. I saw this a lot in the schools when the kids returned from the pandemic, right? A lot of these kids, all the way from preschool to high school, were socially isolated for a good year, right?
Mhm.
A lot of these kids came back to school with significant issues.
Anxiety.
Pardon me?
I said they probably have bad anxiety.
Anxiety, depression, real mental health struggles upon the return to school. Just think of what happened during that year of the pandemic. Nobody could see their friends. Everybody was isolated, trying to learn online. It was a real struggle for a lot of kids, and we're seeing the effects of that play forward now. Let's talk about elder abuse. Elder abuse is actually a type of family violence. What kinds of, for those of you that have worked or are working with elderly, what might you observe with elder neglect, elder abuse? It's very
The,
common and it's increasing exponentially. Go ahead.
the family members mainly speaking for them, not allowing them to have a voice.
Okay.
Malnutrition.
Malnutrition.
Bruising.
Unexplained falls.
And we see these horrible stories sometimes on the news where of elder abuse and or elder neglect where, maybe they're trying to demean them, name calling, right? Trying to uh, um, have less access to family members. There's lots of
But
different.
they can take advantage of their financials too. Like
That was
their
that was my next one. Financial abuse. Okay, scamming the elderly, right? What do you do if elderly client moves in with their adult child, right? And all of a sudden, this adult child wants to take over all their finances, even though the elderly person has been just fine taking care of their finances. That's a red flag, right?
Yeah.
Victims of violence exhibit symptoms, specifically kids. Kids are more prone to frequent headaches, stomach aches, bedwetting, anxiety, depression, withdrawn behavior, maybe inappropriate sexual behavior or sexual knowledge that at that age they shouldn't have, right? Saw this a lot in the schools, with the kids that were coming into the clinics with lots of physical complaints, day after day after day. Well, there were cases where when the staff was finally able to do an in-depth assessment, all those physical and emotional signs were they were being abused or neglected, or somebody in their house was being abused or neglected, right? We know that abused women have some common symptoms: chronic headaches, palpitations, sleep, appetite disturbances, sexual dysfunction, increased risk of irritable bowel syndrome, urinary frequency, urinary urgency, maybe recurrent vaginal infections. And they also, believe it or not, abused women experience more miscarriages, preterm birth, low birth weight infants. And as we know, abuse, and we talked about this when we talked about teen pregnancy, but abuse in general increases with pregnancy. Another form of violence is called intimate partner homicide. Okay, and this comes up on your next exam. So take a few notes on this. Okay, intimate partner homicide. The biggest risk factor for intimate partner homicide is some kind of previous domestic violence incident. And that makes sense. Some other risk factors for intimate partner homicide: access to guns, maybe estrangement, maybe threats to kill, threats with a weapon, maybe attempted strangulation. Intimate partner homicide is on the rise in this country. Okay. When we suspect any kind of abuse in an adult, we try and ask directly in non-judgmental way opportunities for them to report without feeling shame. Right? Parents we know that have low social support, maybe have a higher risk of depression, maybe have multiple stress factors and a history of abuse, they then become at risk for abusing their own kids. This is kind of a hard subject to talk about. However, if you are out working in the community, in any of the community settings, the chances of you interacting with clients or kids that have either been abused, neglected, or witnessed something horrible, or maybe perpetrators, the chances of you interacting with these people are quite high. Elders. We touched on elders, but elders are at risk for any kind of violence: physical, emotional, financial, as well as neglect. Emotional abuse with elders includes behaviors of demeaning, trying to affect the elder's self-esteem, maybe name calling, scaring, embarrassing them, destroying property we didn't talk about, and not letting them see family or friends. As we talked about earlier, neglect occurs when basic needs are not met: food, housing, clothing, shelter, medical care. And even as far as the fear of abandonment, my healthcare person or my caretaker is going to abandon me if I don't toe the line. Suicide. Last area of violence to talk about: suicide, self-directed violence. You know, it's the second leading cause of death in young adults. Okay, one of the biggest leading risk factors to suicide is depression, right? Depression, substance abuse, other mental disorders. Okay, have they had prior suicide attempts? Is there a family history of suicide? Are there other comorbidities of mental disorders? Substance abuse or violence within the families? Are there firearms in the home? Somebody been incarcerated, even them, right? Have they been exposed to other suicidal behavior from or suicidal ideations from other family members? Okay. Anybody else want to add anything to that concept? There's so many different types of violence, right? There's so many effects on it: physical, emotional, financial, psychological, right? And they're, again, perpetrator, victim, witness. Those are all your casualties of violence. This last topic I want to cover, for me, as I've been talking about all term, is one of the most important chapters in any of your books, I think. The culture. And how do you work? How do you develop your own cultural competency? Okay. And I want to go through some parts that I've highlighted here. in the book for you that are important to
What
being
book is
able
that?
to, pardon me?
Which textbook is that?
I am in Fundamentals,
Okay,
chapter 14, on page 187.
thank you.
All right, so culture really is everything we believe to be true about the world, right? What is a culture? We're all from different cultures, okay? It's a set of beliefs, values, assumptions about life that we pick up starting in childhood. All right, we know that different cultures have different differences, they have similarities, but we're all unique. Okay, so this is the first part. So it's a collection of values, beliefs, assumptions. Each culture encompasses a variety of learned behaviors, beliefs, attitudes, and norms. And all that regulates how we behave. What is our social conduct as we integrate with the world? Okay, so a couple of terms I want you to be aware of, or a couple of facts about culture. So we know the culture is learned and acquired. Okay, it's called enculturation. Okay, actually starts at birth and continues throughout our life as a seamless and unconscious process. Right? We are members of a particular culture perceive their cultural norms as normal and natural. Okay. Culture is also shared by a group. Okay. So the Vietnamese culture, the Russian culture, the Middle Eastern culture, the all these different groups of cultures, right? Families, tribal groups, regional populations, nations have a culture, professional groups, subgroups within lots of different groups within every society that have their own culture, right? We know the culture is incorporated into our identity, right? We adopt whatever the values, beliefs, practices, norms of that culture are as we grow up, right? Our culture defines us, right? It defines us and our perception of ourselves and others, right? And last is the culture is dynamic and changes under the influence of shared experiences, right? Cultural norms evolve over time. Okay. We've talked about this a lot this term, but how do we develop cultural competence? Okay. Real important here. Nurses must develop cultural competence to deliver care that meets the standards of culturally congruent care. Okay. And as I've told you before, developing cultural competence is a lifetime process. I'm still developing my cultural competence after 40 years in nursing. All right. It starts with us being culturally aware and culturally sensitive to other cultures. All right. So a couple of terms you need to be familiar with as we prepare for the next exam. Cultural awareness. All right. We need to be aware and understand that health is expressed differently across different cultures. And that certain cultural influences will guide people in certain cultures to have their opinions, values, beliefs about health, illness, disease, death. Right? So it is up to us to, as we're developing our cultural competency, to be culturally aware of other cultures. Cultural sensitivity. the ability to engage and communicate with an individual from another culture in a manner that demonstrates respect for their culture. Right? And I've highlighted this sentence, because this is kind of the crux of everything about cultural competence. It involves knowing yourself, examining your own values, beliefs, attitudes, prejudices. Right? It involves keeping an open mind and trying to see the world from a different perspective. I mean, that's really the end game of cultural competence. Being able to see the world, see our client, see their family, see their community as unique, knowing that their culture may be vastly different from yours. But competence is the ability to see their culture through their own eyes and try and incorporate as much of their values, beliefs, practices into the health plan. It's really that simple. But we must work as nurses. It's lifelong. We're always working on developing our cultural competence. Those are some of the key words I want you to be able to. One of our case study questions, rationales, talks about this. But know the difference between cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and cultural competence. Okay. Barriers. What are some barriers to cultural competence? Well, one is stereotyping, right? What's stereotyping? Applying certain beliefs and behaviors about a culture without really assessing the individual needs. So you're stereotyping. You're lumping them into a group without really knowing what their culture is about. Oops. Another barrier is prejudice. I'm on page 194, chapter 14. Prejudice. Another barrier is ethnocentrism. Really, we believe that all our culture, whatever your culture is, I believe that my culture is superior to yours. That's a barrier. Okay. Cultural imposition. That's when we're forcing our culture or imposing our culture onto others. Okay. And then cultural conflict is definitely a barrier, right? If we have some kind of a cultural conflict, that's really a perceived threat arising from maybe a misunderstanding, miscommunication of how we're responding to certain clients. Okay, maybe you say something wrong, or they're delivered a food tray that has food on there that is not part of their cultural diet. Okay. Cultural conflicts typically, I mean, overall, they're really unavoidable, but we have to do whatever's necessary to minimize those conflicts in order to be delivering culturally competent care. But conflicts are going to arise. It's how we handle those conflicts that makes a difference. Okay. And then ultimately, cultural shock as a barrier, right? It's our ability as nurses, we feel helpless, discomfort, and just not comfortable in trying to understand somebody else's culture, right? We can't adapt their beliefs to competently take care of them. Their beliefs, practices, norms are so vastly different that you're unable to provide competent care. What do you do? What if you do if that's a scenario? Can't abandon the client. You have to make sure that their care is transferred to somebody else. If you are in the situation of cultural shock where you just can't take care of the client or whatever their beliefs are. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. Hopefully when you have a cultural conflict, and you will, you have the tools and the skills necessary to resolve that conflict. Maybe it's education, maybe it's misunderstanding, maybe it's whatever you have to do to rectify the situation. I had a lot of cultural conflicts when I was in school nursing. It seemed like every year there was a new population of students that I was unfamiliar with. And I had to reach out, learn, grow, and gain knowledge about the different cultures that were in the different schools. And yes, there were cultural conflicts that arose, but it was the way we handled it, making sure we knew what the expectations of the parents were of to have the kids in school. Were there any special needs, special requests, things we could do, things we couldn't do? And this came up a lot with immunizations. You know, a lot of cultures feel very differently about immunizations, and we had to respect that, but we had to learn about what their beliefs were, what their values were. Okay? Some cultural differences that can create cultural conflict, right? Those are areas maybe of communication, maybe their view of time. We talked about different cultures being past focused, present focused, future focused, right? What about personal space? The closeness of how close you get to people. What about the beliefs about families, social organizations, social family structures, nutritional practices, issues related to death and dying, end of life, healthcare beliefs. There's a lot of areas that there are significant cultural differences. And so we need to be aware. And this part goes through all of these cultural differences. So you are responsible for reading this whole chapter. And so I would have a look at it. And I would pay particular attention to this table here, table 14.3. This is an excellent summary table of common cultural values, practices, and beliefs for 6 common populations: Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, Indians, European Americans, and Arab Americans. And look at some of the differences. You know, if you look at the Hispanics, I've highlighted a few things. Often they seek help within the family first when they're sick. Some may even seek the help of a folk healer. Right? Wearing of religious objects and placing them in their home is common. Okay, so have a look at this and look at the differences between these cultures. It's fascinating. Whoops.
Professor Jania in the waiting room.
Who is?
Jania Gibson.
Okay. Oh, I have 3 people in the waiting room. I was covered. Okay. Thanks. Appreciate that. And then this is an excellent read, this part of the chapter, where it talks about clinical judgment model in transcultural nursing, multicultural nursing. And so have a look at this. It goes through the ADPI. Clinical judgment model for practicing transcultural nursing. So I have these highlighted, so I do want you to read that. Okay. Cultural competence and cultural competence is a wide range of behaviors. We talked about touch, personal space, body language, perceptions on health, illness, influenced by family structure, childbearing practices, time orientation, even eye contact. Eye contact can be very different from culture to culture. So as nurses, we need to approach each client completely unique and learn about the patient's culture through observation and assessment. right? And as we talked about, we must also understand our own cultural beliefs to avoid passing on judgment and stereotyping. Let's say you're in a community that has cultures that you're unfamiliar with or you don't know much about. It is encouraged that you seek out the trusted community leaders, right, that are working with that population, helping them get integrated into the community. So remember, community nursing is a team nursing approach. You can't do everything to everybody all the time. You're going to have to seek out trusted community leaders to help. Okay, so trusted community leaders can help the community nurse with an entry point into different populations in the community. They can help you develop a plan that's best suited for meeting the perceived needs of a different culture, right? Community leaders know their groups best. It is advocated that you partner with these leaders to try and learn about different cultures. I did this all the time in the schools. You know, if there was a certain new population culture that I was unaware of, I would ask the parents, where does everybody get together? Where does everybody gather within in your group? I would reach out to those leaders, even if I need them to communicate about resources available, food banks, clothing banks, immunization information. So if you're in the community, you're tapping community leaders, okay, that can help you. What if you're asked to work with non-English speaking groups of the population? As we talked about in a previous class, we always try to provide information or material to them in their native language, right? Remember talking about that? So we need to maintain an open and objective attitude towards individuals and their cultures. We need to avoid seeing all individuals as alike. We need to be aware of our own cultural beliefs, avoid projecting those beliefs onto others. We talked about that. We talked about cultural awareness. Cultural awareness is the self-examination and exploration of our own biases and prejudices. All right, nurses who lack cultural knowledge and competence, you're going to feel inadequate or helpless to be able to care for clients of different cultures. And I love finishing up with this. This is something I'm not sure if it was from the book, but to develop cultural competence, be sensitive to the cultural implications during each encounter with each client. Avoid stereotyping based on race and ethnicity. Ask questions to stimulate learning about the client's culture. Avoid making assumptions about nonverbal cues from clients from unfamiliar cultures. Please continue to ongoingly discover all the different various cultures. That's a priority for nursing practice. Okay? So my question to you all, having heard all that, my question to you all is, what experiences do you have, either in previous work settings, current work settings, in which you're working with different cultures, and how did you become culturally competent with different cultures?
I would ask questions.
Ask questions if you don't know. No.
Never judge.
Never judge. Has anybody had any experience with certain cultures? And what have you learned? Nobody's worked with a client from a different culture?
I've worked with patients that are what is it? Arabic? Is that the word? I'm not sure if it's Arabic or not,
Okay,
but she had the head wrap,
okay,
and she hijab. She had the hijab on,
okay.
and she had to have surgery.
Hmm.
So she ended up removing it, but only with women in the room. And
Hmm.
she put on a head cover, but it was like surgically approved. It was just like a net or something.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else work with anybody from different cultures, and what was your learning experience?
No, but we did learn in sim lab about a patient with Judaism, like IVs or bandages or anything at the end that was on them physically when they pass away, that is to go with them. We can't get rid of that. They want that to
Mhm.
be kept. They asked for their rabbi to come and be a
Mhm.
part of the process, and then we're supposed to cover their face too
Mhm.
after the way.
Yeah. You're going to be learning different practices and values and beliefs of certain cultures your entire nursing career, right? It may be even different cultures that your kids go to school with, your neighborhood. It's not just in your work setting. What else? Who else has worked with clients from different cultures? And how did you become knowledgeable? We talked about asking. Has anybody had any cultural conflicts arise?
Mhm. If you just respect their religion or whatever they got going on, there shouldn't be a conflict.
It shouldn't be, but they do arise.
I wasn't in the like a nursing care setting, but I was working at a restaurant in high school, and I was just like sweeping, and accidentally the broom accidentally hit this guy's foot, and he grabbed the broom and spit on it, and I was like kind of freaked out, but apparently that was part of his like religion or his culture. Like it's like I don't even know what the word is. It's a bad
What?
omen or something. So like he does that to make it better.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Stop laughing at me, Shireen.
Yeah. Um, it's an evolution. Being culturally competent really is an evolution of learning and developing, right? Learning and developing acceptance, tolerance, because our goal is to provide as much of their cultural needs, desires, actions, is to provide as much of that into that health plan for whatever kind of client you're taking care of, whether it's a kid in the schools, elderly person in a memory home, dialysis center with dialysis patients, oncology. I mean, think of all the scenarios, home visits, all the scenarios in community settings that you work with clients. You are going to be exposed to and taking care of being responsible for clients, families of different cultures, even populations of different cultures. So I want to pull up a case study. My Monday group told me that they tried to open my case study and it wasn't available to them.
You have to download it, so you can't just preview it. You have to physically download it. I had the same issue.
Okay, so rather than breaking out into groups, we did this yesterday um, as a group. So I'm just going to pull up the case study here and we'll do this case study as a group. If I can get it over here. Let's see. Why can't this come over here? There it is. Okay. Let's have a look at this case study. It's one about culturally competent care. I have a couple of messages. Okay. Um, Can everybody see this? Yes?
Yeah.
Let's answer a couple of these questions first and talk out loud. I'd like your input. Discuss ways in which culture can affect nursing practice. What do you think? How can culture affect our nursing practice?
Different cultures and religions require different things, like with with uh with patients that are, what's the word? The one that doesn't, you can't give them blood.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's
Jehovah.
Witness. Mhm.
You have to know they're religious, because that's a question. Religion, that's something that you ask them in the beginning. So it affects every patient is affected differently. You take care of them differently.
Absolutely. Discuss ways in which culture can affect nursing practice. Are you on board as a nurse with the different values and beliefs and practices and needs that they have? Or are you not on board? Right? Those are two vastly different ways that different cultures can affect nursing practice, right?
I mean, I think that's where it comes in that we have to put our personal belief, like we can't judge and we don't, all we're there to do is to take care of them. Whatever they want is what they want.
Exactly.
Right. As long as it doesn't compromise the care, right? Number 2, describe methods for developing cultural competence to meet the health needs of culturally diverse clients, individuals, communities, and organizations. What are some methods for developing cultural competence that we've talked about?
Doing research.
Research.
I was gonna say, if you work with somebody that's like, obviously in a different culture or anything, like ask questions like, what would you do in this kind of situation, or what would you think would be most beneficial, and see like their perspective.
Exactly. Excellent, Alyssa. Thank you. What else? What if it's different populations in the community? Seek out that community leader, right? That's working with those populations. They will have incredible knowledge about how to communicate, provide information, how to help, whatever the needs and goals of that community are. What are some other methods of developing cultural competences? Alyssa, I think you said this, but examining our own personal feelings, right? We can't be pushing our cultures onto other cultures. We can't think our cultures are superior. We can't ignore that they have different cultural beliefs or values based on the things we talked about. Different communication styles, different personal space issues, touching, language, right? Food preferences. Number 3, describe major facilitators and barriers to providing culturally competent care for different populations. What were some of the barriers we talked about?
Stereotyping, prejudice, the ethocentrism.
Yep. Yep. Okay, let's have a look at this case study. Okay, so we have Nancy. She's a public health nurse. She's working in a clinic that provides services to a community of Hmong immigrants. These individuals are applying for immigration visas and are required to undergo medical screening examination. Primary purpose of conducting these examinations is to determine the presence of any communicable diseases and to vaccinate accordingly with whatever the CDC guidelines are. Okay, so that's your backstory. So she is typically the first person to initiate contact with the new immigrants. And I don't really care that you can see the answers. We're just going to go through this together. Okay, so she's the first person to see this group. Okay, she doesn't speak the same language as the immigrants who are coming to her clinic, but she has access to an interpreter. That's fantastic. Okay. She is aware that the clients are nervous about seeking care because they are unfamiliar with the U.S. health practices, which is common. Okay, so the first question, the public health nurses providing service to these recent immigrants, what should they be most concerned with? Most. It's in your backstory at the top.
All the
Hey,
diseases
Herbert.
that they may have.
The different communicable diseases.
Yeah. Yeah, that's priorities. Not to say that the other answers we need to investigate, right? Getting an interpreter, right? Delivery of care within financial guidelines, demonstrating understanding of their non-traditional practices. First and foremost, what is most important? We need to be able to identify any high-risk diseases that come with this population. So again, it's that cultural knowledge that we have to get. Okay, and let's look at the rationale. All right, nurses need to know if there are specific risk factors for any given immigrant population. Okay, the example is Southeast Asians. Their population are often at risk for Hep B, they're at risk for TB, intestinal parasites, visual, hearing, dental issues, right? And with those issues, we know that most of those conditions are preventable or treatable if they're managed correctly. All right, so when working with the immigrant populations, we talked about this. Consider how your own background, beliefs, knowledge may be significantly different from those people that you're providing care to. Right? Language barriers may interfere with efforts to provide assistance. Right? And once again, we need to understand the non-traditional healing practices that a client might use. All right, so again, it's gaining the knowledge. That just reinforces how important it is for us to be gaining the knowledge. Okay, number 2. Nancy Chang, is a nurse who speaks English and Chinese. She's dealing with the new Hmong immigrants who only speak Laotian. That's their primary language, and they are unfamiliar with Western medicine. How is cultural competence demonstrated in dealing with this population? Obviously, you can see what the answers are, but let's talk about those. Okay, so for sure, B is the correct answer, right? The nurse is providing care while paying attention to the individual's beliefs about pain, touch, modesty, eye contact, being aware of those factors within that culture. The other correct answer is E. The nurse provides care that acknowledges the differences in ways the individuals respond to illness and treatment. Right? Those are culturally competent practices. Okay. A is incorrect because we're not providing the information to them in their primary language. Right? The nurse delivers care while verbalizing all medical and nursing procedures being conducted. Why is that incorrect? They're not going to understand it. Right? It doesn't say the care is being provided in their primary language. So they're not going to have a clue what the nurse is talking about. And then D, nurse provides care without regard for cost or outcomes because it's required. No, that's not necessarily true. Right? We're always thinking about cost. Okay? So we don't ignore cost. Maybe more expensive to take care of one population that has different needs than the others, but we are concerned about cost. Let's look at the rationale here. Culturally competent nurses function effectively when caring for clients of other cultures. Okay, nurses who strive to be culturally competent respect people from other cultures. They value diversity. And by doing this, this helps them provide more responsive care. Right? So, as a summary, cultural competence includes acknowledging the fundamental differences in the ways clients and families respond to illness and treatment from maybe what your response might be or the Western healthcare system might be. Right? So, examples, dietary practices, Talked about this. Pain management. How do they see death and dying? What are their beliefs on modesty, eye contact, personal space, closeness, touching? You know, some cultures love to give great big hugs, others, no. Okay. And then the last one. So she decides that she's going to attend a class at the local Laotian Cultural Center so that she can learn more about the customs and practices of the community she serves. This demonstrates which of the following elements of cultural competence. What is she trying to do here?
Gain knowledge.
Yeah, she's trying to become culturally knowledgeable about that particular culture. And this last rationale gives a good description of what each of these are: cultural desire, skill, awareness, knowledge. You should be able to figure it out by the words, but let's read through it. Okay, these words are going to come up on your next exam, not just from this rationale, but there's several culture questions on your next exam. That's why I'm spending so much time on this. But I'm also spending so much time on this is because this is an evolving, ongoing, lifelong journey for nurses, right? Because throughout your whole career, you're going to be learning about different cultures and working with clients from different cultures. So cultural knowledge is information about the elements of diverse cultures and ethnic groups. We know that. Okay, the emphasis with cultural knowledge is learning about what their worldview is from their perspective. When we have an understanding of the client's culture, it decreases that cultural opportunity for cultural conflict, decreases misinterpretations, misapplication, miscommunication, and thus may impede their cooperation with whatever healthcare regimen you're developing. Cultural desire, simple. It's what's our desire? What's our motivation? Right? Do we have the desire to provide culturally competent care? Hopefully. Hopefully, you have the desire to provide culturally competent care. If you don't, lots of conflicts are going to arise, right? Cultural skill refers to your ability to provide that culturally competent care. Effective integration of your awareness, so your knowledge, to obtain the skills that particular culture that you need to provide culturally competent care. So the skill is you are able to provide it. You are able to provide the care in a culturally competent way. And then cultural awareness, obviously. Everything starts with cultural awareness, all the way going back to week 2 when we started talking about vulnerable populations and populations at risk. Cultural awareness. Everything starts with the self-examination. We talked about this with the LGBTQ population, the homeless population, and all the other vulnerable populations we discussed. Cultural awareness is our self-examination, our in-depth exploration of our own beliefs and values, and how do they influence our behavior, our ability to provide culturally competent care. It's really that simple. Okay, so cultural diversity, cultural care, cultural competency, cultural awareness are all attributes that you're going to be developing. Probably already have a lot of development already, but it's ongoing journey. And for me, 40 years later, it's still a journey. Yes, I can provide culturally competent care. Yes, I am open to learn about different cultures, their values, beliefs. And yes, I do have the ability to incorporate their culture into their healthcare regimen. You know, that's something you're going to be working with all through your career. So, anyway, thoughts. What are you thinking? I'm assuming everybody's already had experience. You're just not talking. I'm assuming you've all had experience with working with different cultures up to this point, whether it be in your work life, your school life, your personal life, right? Is there anybody who hasn't had any interaction with any different person or group or community of a different culture? I'm sure you all have. So that concludes my last lecture. Was that informative? Was that helpful?
Sure, yes, Professor.
Do you talk about culture in your other classes? Sharina's shaking her head. What?
When in med-surg, we had a question about a patient that was what we were discussing today. Hmong is how they say it, or Hmong. We discussed that. But other than that, mainly a little bit in foundations about respect and the food, like kosher or whatever, but not like full blown in depth.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think I went full blown in depth. And I did that because it is such a key feature on your journey in nursing. And look at our world. Look at our country. Look at our communities. Look at our neighborhoods. Look at how diverse everything is now. Right? So anyway, so I'm going to stop recording. I know we're a few